Hello, listeners. Before we start, I just want to remind you, you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are listening to the Nighttime Podcast.
It's now been over 7 weeks since 4-year-old Jack and his 6-year-old sister, Lilly Sullivan, were reported missing from their rural Nova Scotia home. As we detailed in previous Nighttime episodes, the children's mother and stepfather told police that when they awoke at around 10 a.m. on Friday, May 2nd, Jack and Lilly were gone. Since then, the case has found itself teetering somewhere between a missing persons case and a criminal investigation. And I must say, this past week has been the busiest and most game-changing week this case has seen. In this episode, Madelayne Klein and I are going to continue our weekly episode series breaking down the past week's developments in this ever-evolving mystery. So let's get into it. Tonight, in this episode of Nighttime, we're going to discuss our 7th week, asking the question, where are Jack and Lilly Sullivan?
My heart tells me these babies are gone. My heart tells me that.
I know the truth. I didn't kill Lilly and Jack.
Ms. Madelayne Klein, how are you this evening?
I'm okay. I might sound a little stuffed up.
Uh-oh.
I think it's because I have a child that sneezes directly into my eyeballs.
Oh, that kind of. Yes, I forgot.
Yeah,
Yes, I remember those days. Yeah, if you have kids, if there is a virus in your city, it will find its way to you. Kids are programmed to touch things, lick their hands. Then they find other kids and they touch each other's faces. And then they get home and just drool and sneeze on their moms and dads. So
Yeah,
congratulations.
they're
Madeline.
bacteria dance-a-thons.
That's a good way to put it. Let's get into it here. We have so much to discuss tonight. In our prior episode covering the case, we managed to include 2 full weeks of updates, which is an amount of time only possible to distill down if the updates are few and far between. That's certainly not the case tonight. If the prior episode covered a slow point in the investigation, this week made up for it as the case has developed more in the past week than it ever has. Many questions were answered, some interesting points were clarified, and the possible criminal nature of the disappearance seems to now be clear. During the past week, the story was driven by an investigative report published by CBC News, which featured in-depth interviews with the children's stepfather, Daniel Martell, and the children's paternal grandmother, Belynda Gray, who was able to demystify many of the rumors surrounding the kid's biological father. And additionally, the province of Nova Scotia has added the case to its Major Rewards for Unsolved Crimes program. So we got a lot to talk about. But first, let's dig into something we missed in the prior episode. We'll back up a bit. Last week, we talked a lot about the June 11th press release issued by the RCMP that outlined the investigators' efforts. They shared the scope of their search, the amount of interviews, they described their use of polygraphs, and their collection of video. But another one of the points went a bit over our head. One of the things they stated is that they've been granted numerous judicial authorizations to seize and examine materials and devices that may provide information useful to investigators. So when you hear that, it sounds a little bit jargony, and maybe that's why it didn't kind of capture our attention. But our keen-eared and eyed listeners were able to flag that maybe as a tell on what's happening behind the scenes. I'm going to read you an email that I got related to our coverage of the June 11th press release, and then we can correct our past mistake. So the email I got says, "Hey, Jordan, I've been a listener for about a year now, and I've especially appreciated your coverage of the Lilly and Jack Sullivan case. I'm in law, and I wanted to add that it's quite significant that the RCMP excluded a warrant, which they referred to as a judicial authorization, to search and seize items. In order to be granted a warrant, the police need to present to a judge an information to obtain application that establishes reasonable grounds that, for one, a crime has been committed, secondly, that evidence related to the crime may be found through their search, and the third, that the proposed location is where the evidence will be found. Perhaps you're aware of this, but you didn't touch on it during the last episode, and I think it's important as it confirms that the investigation seems to have a criminal component and that the subject of these searches and seizures will likely inform the public or the journalists the nature of the RCMP's theory and their suspects. In my opinion, I think they have a very good idea who's responsible, but they're gathering evidence to ensure the Crown has a solid case before bringing any charges forward. Because, of course, they only have one kick at the can, and they don't want to mess this one up.
Crazy.
So it's great to get that kind of insight. We would have completely missed that. I kind of, when I read this idea of like searching and seizing, I thought of it as this voluntary thing. But that's not the case. What they have done, the police, have actually applied for successfully search warrants, which you can't just get for a case that doesn't involve criminality. It's something related to like the collection of evidence for a crime. So I think that's really telling, especially considering how much we've talked about, is this a criminal investigation or not?
Definitely. And I think maybe that's why we glossed over it a little bit, is because we know that the stepfather, Daniel, offered his devices, be it a cell phone, laptop, whatever. So I think maybe just from that, we just assumed Malaya did too. And then, yeah, like when, in my mind, when I'm thinking of police searching cell phones, it's like, give me your phone. And it's like, okay. But that's, yeah, it's the huge, what word am I looking for? Like process. And I didn't realize that.
Yeah, but it opens an interesting door and opens Pandora's box a little bit. The process to get a search warrant involves the police presenting a judge something called an ITO, or an information to obtain. It's an application. People refer to them as ITOs. And that's where the investigator would list their justification for searching or seizing or obtaining this item. When the judge reviews that and approves it or denies it or whatever the case may be, it's often sealed by the judge and people can't access it until a certain point comes that it's unsealed. The ITOs and the applications for search warrants are often what gives journalists or the public information on law enforcement's theory and investigative strategies before a trial happens. I remember when I was covering Portapic, the mass casualty in Nova Scotia, it took almost a year before, or maybe even 2 years before, we received kind of official statements about what the RCMP believed happened and what searching they were doing. But before that, all of the search warrant applications were made public, and that was what led people like to understand or to know what was going on behind the scenes.
So to clarify, they will release that while the investigation is ongoing, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But they're not required to. You need to apply to get access to it. And I started the process myself. I don't think they're going to give it to me, but I wrote to the court saying, like, the RCMP have successfully obtained these search warrants. I'd like to get access to their applications. And here was the response I got back from the courts. Hello, Jordan. There's currently no publicly available search warrant applications in this matter. However, there are 6 or more sealed warrants related to that investigation. When a warrant is sealed, no one, including court staff, can access its contents. Anyone seeking to vary that sealing order would need to apply to the provincial court in Pictou. I'm aware at present of one media outlet that has submitted an application, with 2 others considering joining their application. If you wish to submit an application yourself, you can submit this form, blah, blah, blah. So all that is to say is that these ITOs, these search warrant applications, are something that journalists now are actively trying to get their hands on. And if they do, I imagine you will see a shocking news report comes out that reveals the RCMP's theory at this point. But all that to say that the judge may keep it sealed, and the judge has that authority to keep it sealed for some period of time. So we may not know. But thanks to this email from a listener who heard last week's show, it kind of opened my eyes to like, whoa, we could, we as in the public could get very close to the RCMP theory by way of these search warrant applications.
Well, because that's been the big question. This whole investigation is, we know that they can't show all their cards, if you will. What evidence did they have to get the warrant?
It's going to be interesting. The whole point of our discussion tonight is to unpack everything that happened in the last week. What we just talked about is something we missed the week prior, and there's a hell of a lot from the last week to get into. As I said, we're going to discuss interviews with the paternal grandmother, Belynda Gray. So that is the Lilly and Jack's biological father's mom. We have a long-form interview with Daniel Martell. Both of them spoke to CBC, whose coverage this past week has been incredible. We have all that to get into. And then we have some more strange news that I'll explain related to a large reward offered for information related to the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan. Let's take our first ad break. When we get back, we'll get into Daniel and the children's paternal grandmother's interviews with CBC. So before the break, Madelayne, I explained to you that CBC's coverage of this case over the past week has been in-depth, it's been thorough, and it's been very revealing. Some of the questions that we've had since the very beginning, I think, were answered over the past week thanks to CBC's coverage. Before we started our talk tonight, we both watched the two interviews we're going to be discussing. Let's start with the paternal grandmother. That's Lilly and Jack's biological father's mother. Her name is Belynda Gray. This is the first time she spoke publicly. She sat down with Kayla Hounsell, a CBC journalist, for I think it was probably like maybe a 15-minute interview that covered all aspects of the case. She described her son's relationship with the children, her relationship with Malia, the children's mother. She discussed how she learned about the disappearance, her involvement in the search. She covered it all, and we can go through it piece by piece, but just broad brush, first of all. How intriguing was her interview to you?
I thought it was a fabulous interview. She's really well spoken, and it cleared up a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she speaks so highly of Malaya, which is refreshing, because we up until this point really don't know anything about her, or didn't know anything about her, and just with all of the speculation online, she's been completely demonized throughout all of this.
It's interesting, and one of the things that I was really anxious to hear her talk about is her son, the children's biological father. Since the beginning of this story, people have asked, who is he? What's his relationship like with the children? The common answers, and I've shied away from saying much of it on these episodes, is often people were saying the children's biological father is in jail. Some people were also saying he just got out of jail, so he probably took the kids. But I couldn't find anything to verify either of that. And I was like, is he in jail? Is he not in jail? Is he in the kid's life? Is he not in the kid's life? I couldn't figure anything out about it. All I knew was his name was Cody Sullivan, hence the children having his last name, Lilly and Jack Sullivan, where their mother is Malaya Brooks, stepfather Daniel Martell. Belynda Gray, we'll jump into a couple excerpts of her interview with Kayla Hounsell of CBC, but in the very first segment I'm going to play, it's her introducing herself, and then she goes to give background on her son Cody and his relationship with Malaya. So let's listen in on it, and then we can talk about this.
I am the grandmother of Lilly and Jack. I am the grandmother on the biological father's side. My son is Cody Sullivan. He's not in jail. He's never been out west. He does not have a criminal record. And right now he's living with me. He has been for 9 months.
And so how long were your son and Malaya together?
3.5 years, I think it was, yeah. I thought they were the picture-perfect family. Then Malaya started to tell me that they were having problems and she wasn't happy. She told me that she wasn't happy and she thinks she's going to leave. And I told her that we supported whatever she decides, that one good parent is way better than 2 broken ones.
And then how did that change your relationship with Lilly and Jack?
I thought it was going to change, but it didn't. Yeah, it didn't change. Malaya, she was a sweetheart. Anytime we wanted to see the kids, she'd come by for a visit. She'd bring them by all the time. It was actually really, really good.
So when was the last time you saw the children?
A 1.5 years, almost, really, it's about 1 year and 9 months.
How did you deal with that?
Really, to be honest, maybe I didn't deal good enough with it. I looked at the fact that when her and my son separated, my son walked away. He chose to walk away, that she wanted sole custody of the kids. So she petitioned the courts for sole custody, and when she did that, he said he was done.
Interesting. So it seems that everything people have said about the children's biological father since the beginning, with the exception of I've seen people say he's not in the children's life. That's the only part of it that seems to be accurate. It seems that the biological father, Cody Sullivan and Malaya, had a decent enough relationship, had 2 kids, and the relationship ended. And for the most part, Cody walked away from the children, which I don't know. There's more to that side of it.
And
Why
like
did she want full custody?
I realize that's not what we're here to talk about, but after having a child of my own, there's no way in hell that I could ever just say, like, you know what, yeah, take full custody. I'm gonna wash my hands of this.
Yeah. Well, for one, they're younger than you and I are. Also, it seems like just given the situation is she was petitioning the courts for custody, so he would have had a custody battle ahead of him. So it seems like he made the decision like I'm not going to go through this fight. I'm just going to walk away. But yeah, that'd be a hard decision. I'm not going to try to speculate on why or how or whatever because I don't know what that would be like.
Right.
But that's a pretty brutal situation to be in. But as we'll hear, Malaya and Belynda, Cody's mother, maintained a relationship, and the children, her grandchildren, remained in her life as time went on. But so far, what we know now that we didn't know before this, Cody, the children's father, wasn't in jail. He wasn't living out west. He didn't just get out of jail.
Where did this come from? Who said it? And why did people run with it?
Yeah, it's much like the party that may or may not have happened the night before. And we'll hear about that a little bit later as we go as well. Let's move a bit forward into the investigation because we're going to hear about the police handling of the children's grandmother and biological father as we go. The next thing we'll play here is another part of the interview with Belynda that I thought was really interesting. In this piece, it's her describing arriving to the children's home the day after, the Saturday, the day after they were reported missing, to assist in the search, and during her answering of her role in the early day of the search, she goes on to describe Malaya as a mother and her Malaya's attitude the day after the disappearance. And this is an interesting one.
I said, Malaya, I said, you know your kids. Nobody knows their kids like their mom. Where do your kids normally go to play out in the yard? What direction do they usually like to explore? And she said, well, they always play up in the little woods right on the side. I said, well, okay. I said, we'll start from that point and we'll work our way out. We had spoken to a search and rescue and we weren't allowed on the other side because that's where they were searching at the time. So we just started combing through the woods up through there. We were gone for a couple of hours. I'm yelling for Lilly and Jack. We always called Jack Jackie Boy. But those woods, I started to feel that I can't see them being in the woods. There's trees everywhere. You literally have to climb over trees, climb under bushes. It is really, really thick. We come back out and I went in to see Malaya again. I assumed she was in shock. She was very, very non-emotional, very just flat, monotone. But Malaya's very soft-spoken anyway. That she's not usually excitable. I thought that's made her a really great mom. She was an excellent mom. She never raised her kid or her voice at the kids. That it was always, now Lily, what did mommy say? And I used to think, now if anybody's meant to be a mom, it was her. A part of me still feels that.
Why only a part of you still feels that? What do you mean?
After seeing the place, seeing the condition of the home, it was like the total opposite of what I knew of Malaya. She was always clean, very clean about herself, about the kids, about her home. This home looked more like a camp, but it was very unkempt. I was pretty surprised.
A lot to say there, but we could start at the last thing she said is it as true? Like, I think a lot of people who've seen photos of this home and photos of the property have thought, like, does that look like a appropriate place to be raising kids? We've talked about it ourselves, but we said, rural Nova Scotia or rural anywhere in Canada, you're going to see homes like this. But I guess it was not typical for Malaya, and at least it struck their children's grandmother, Belynda, as a surprise when she arrived there. But as she said in the prior clip, it's been over a year since she saw the kids. So I guess showing up there and seeing how the kids were living, yeah, that was probably a shock. But of that segment we just listened to, what stood out to you?
That part, like everything was, what she said about Malaya was so lovely, and I thought this is so refreshing, and it makes so much sense that Malaya's soft-spoken to begin with, so she's kind of shying away from the spotlight, which she has every right to do.
Yeah.
But the fact that, the grandmother noticed like an obvious difference. Malaya's been in her life for the last 6 years or however long it's been. And what changed in the last year and 9 months that, she's living differently. Yeah.
And Belynda described Malaya having kind of a flat kind of attitude and personality and tone or whatever. That would kind of explain that one short interview that Malaya did the day or so after the disappearance. She spoke to, I think it was Global News she spoke to, but she did come across as, I wouldn't say cold, but just a little flat. I kind of chalked it up to like she's just probably so shocked by what is going on that's how she's reacting. But maybe that's just a little bit of her personality, I guess. It seemed like Belynda
just like stoic.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's the word.
I suppose so, but it's that whole thing was interesting. I think the idea of arriving there and her just being a little composed. I don't know what I read from that, but it's just not what I expected.
She also, and I've said this before, but like everyone deals with shock and trauma differently. So like she could have been completely disassociated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Like she,
And what we're hearing her Belynda describe, is the scene this Saturday. So the children would have already been missing one overnight. So that would have, as a parent, if your kids were missing, the first night that they're missing overnight is the longest night of your life. So,
well, she probably didn't sleep.
And there's all these people she doesn't know in and out of the house. Police would have already searched the home, and news would have been there. So she would have been going through some serious stuff. But the next part of Belynda's interview is definitely interesting. What we're going to hear about now is CBC was asking her about all of her interactions with the police. She starts by describing, before she even goes to the children's home, Friday night, in the middle of the night, hours after the children were reported missing, the police show up at her home. I think it was like 3 a.m, she describes, just to see if the children are there, because they're hunting for the kids anywhere they could have possibly wandered off to. They check the grandmothers, of course. So she'll describe that, but then she goes on to describe the various interviews she and her son Cody had with RCMP during the past 7 weeks. And this is interesting because this, I guess, will give us another glimpse inside the investigation.
It was around between 3 and 3:30 in the morning. A couple of cop cars pull into the driveway. The lights wake me up that I'm a fairly light sleeper, so I see the cars pull in, so I knew what it was. So they come inside. They only stood in the kitchen. They wanted me to wake Cody up, and they wanted to know when was the last time he had seen the kids, and that they were just making sure that the kids weren't here. And then they left.
Were you ever formally questioned?
Yes.
So then it's about a month after Lilly and Jack are last seen that they come and formally question you.
So it's about 3 weeks. They question Cody for an hour and a half in the vehicle, and then they question me for 2 hours in the vehicle.
How did that feel to you?
I didn't mind. I mean, to me, I expected I'm the grandmother, so it wasn't a surprise to me. I'm assuming the sooner they do all that, I wish they would have done it sooner, that the sooner they can move on. So I didn't have a problem. My son was a little upset about it. He said they made him feel like he did something wrong, and he said he hadn't seen the kids in 3 years. So he was a little upset about it, that he said that they really come at him hard. They wanted to know what her favorite color was, and he said, they were babies when I seen them last. He said, she was just learning what she wanted to figure out to eat. I don't know what her color is. So yeah, he was pretty upset.
Have they ever talked to him again since then?
A couple of days ago, they had contact and they told him that they weren't looking his way anymore, that everything was fine.
And have they ever given you any information?
No, it's always the same thing.
Which is what?
They've got everybody on it. They are looking at all avenues. They can't divulge any information that could compromise their investigation. It's the exact same words.
So that answers one question. We've seen a lot of people online. They should talk to the biological dad. Obviously, they did multiple times. Starting with the night of the disappearance, the police went there just to make sure the kids weren't there. Then it took several weeks before the police actually came back to the home for what sounded like a bit more something between an interview and interrogation of both Belynda and her son Cody. I just want to talk this out briefly, and then we'll get a bit deeper into what we just heard. But could it be they did in fact spend the first week or two working the theory that the children did just wander off, and then somehow after 2 or 3 weeks that changed and it became a criminal investigation? Because in my mind, if it was from the very beginning, if there was any thought that it could be a criminal investigation, the first 3 people I'd be looking at heavily if I was a police officer would be the children's stepfather, Daniel Martell, the mother, Malaya Brooks, and the biological father, Cody Sullivan. To wait 3 or 4 weeks to then be like, Cody, get in the car. We need to have a pretty heavy talk with you that's going to make you uncomfortable. That surprises me that it took that long to get that point, to get to that point.
Well, I think that's exactly what happened, is they were just, the first couple of weeks they were going off the only information that they had, and they really truly thought that these kids just wandered off into the woods. And then I think as time went on and they didn't find anything, a shred of anything, even a dog couldn't pick up a scent, then they figured we better broaden the spectrum of what we're dealing with here.
Again, this is why we're left guessing, but if a journalist or a member of the public ever gets their hands on the search warrant applications, I am sure that is where we'll find out when the investigation changed and what led it to change. When Portapic happened, the mass casualty in Nova Scotia, the ITOs, the search warrant applications that were released, I'm going off memory from a few years ago, but I think it was something like 85 pages long. And this application included text of interviews with different people. There was a lot of redactions, but it was almost like, by reading through them, it was almost like sitting in the cop car for the first week or two of the investigation and following the paper trail that led them to want to, search blank or seize blank. And it would be fascinating to get that in this case. But Belynda ended that segment of the interview we just listened to by saying the police had recently contacted Cody and said, "We're not looking your way anymore. It's all good." I don't know. Of course we're getting her version of what they said. I've never heard of the police kind of telling someone we're not looking towards you anymore, but maybe they found something that led them to think we actually have a suspect now, and Cody, don't worry about it.
Aren't you told when you're cleared?
I don't know. Would you be?
I don't think that's so crazy.
I would, if I was a cop, I would tell people they were cleared when they weren't, just so I'd see what they do. They can do all sorts of things. In Canada, we have the Mr. Big sting. Why not tell someone they're cleared when they're not?
You never know.
The Canadian police can literally pose as crime lords and pay you to do crimes until eventually you admit to whatever crime it is that they're investigating. To say you're cleared when you're not, come on.
Well, I wouldn't put it past them. Who knows? If maybe it's all part of their process.
I can't help but think that something has changed that led it to become criminal, and something has changed to lead them away from Daniel and Cody as possible suspects to someone else. Because what we're going to listen in on next is Daniel Martell, the children's stepfather. He also sat down with the same CBC journalist for another long interview, and we'll do the same thing. I picked out a couple kind of moments from it that I really want to get into with you. But for anyone listening, the interview we just listened to some segments of with Belynda, there's much more to that interview. If you find CBC's coverage of this online, I suggest watching the full interview with Belynda and the one we're going to hear with Daniel multiple times, because as someone who's followed this case since the beginning, it is the most revealing pieces of information we've ever gotten so far. We've had the RCMP press conference and a couple press releases, some short sound bites in the media from Daniel and Malaya. This is different. This is 15 minutes where you see their face and hear them be asked follow-up questions. It's a whole different beast.
And I think it really, both of the interviews tie up so many loose ends and answer so many questions that are continuing to be asked online.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, I don't know, maybe I'm just like easily tricked, but I really don't think Daniel had anything to do with this.
Yeah, well, when we listen to the interview with him, we'll talk about that. But hearing Belynda's discussion there, Belynda's interview there, to me, she sounds completely innocent of any involvement in the children's disappearance. She sounds like a grieving grandmother who is grieving amongst an already kind of strained relationship within her family. So it's just a tragedy within a bad situation in terms of her relationship with the children and her son's relationship with the children. It was sad before the kids went missing, looking at this story.
Yes. And I didn't realize that until her interview, that I was like, oh, maybe things weren't great before. Daniel and Malaya's relationship deteriorated, like within hours after the kids' disappearance. There was writing on the wall. Like they weren't a picture perfect couple before that.
Yeah. But it seems like, Daniel and Malaya broke up and she left with the baby and all that stuff. We know about that. But in hearing Belynda, it sounds like something very similar happened with Cody, her first partner. They had kids. Everything seemed to be going well. They seemed like the picture perfect couple. And then Malaya says to her boyfriend's mother, like, it's not working out. I think I'm done. Before you know it, she's petitioning for full custody of the kids. He walks away. She gets the kids. Then she's with Daniel. They have a child together. And now it seems like the same kind of stuff is happening. She left with that baby named Meadow. And
something that I didn't ever consider was, I just asked a few minutes ago, I said, what changed in the year and 9 months since the paternal grandmother had seen the kids? And something really big changed is Malaya had another baby.
Yes, baby Meadow.
And like postpartum depression is a very, very real thing. So and I myself have an 18 months today, actually. And yeah, I can't believe that never crossed my mind, the fact that postpartum could play a huge role in her mental health. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And her mental health is something that we discussed last week, where Daniel Martell was in the news asking people to lay off on her because he's worried about her mental health affecting his daughter, Meadow. I'm by far an expert in postpartum depression, but am I correct in saying that people who have postpartum depression with a child are also likely to have the same kind of issues with future children? Like, is it not something where you just have a predisposition to, or something of that nature?
Yeah. And I'm also not an expert, but I think if you do suffer from postpartum depression with your first and then have a second, there's a good chance it'll, depending on how far apart your kids are, it'll just continue, or you'll get it again and it might even be worse.
Yeah. Let's move on to the second interview we are going to break down and dissect. It may answer as many questions and demystify as many points as Belynda's. This is Daniel Martell's longest sit-down interview I've seen yet. He's been in the news a lot, but it's usually these quick sound bites. He's standing in his driveway and he talks for 25 seconds. This is a sit-down professional studio kind of interview for, I think the total thing's about 15 minutes long. I was absolutely captivated by every moment of it. Let's start with Daniel, a segment in which Daniel discusses the polygraph he took, the questions he asked, everything about the polygraph. This is something we spoke about last week. We had a few news clips of Daniel elaborating a bit more on the polygraph, but nothing like what we're about to hear during his sit down with CBC. I think this as well will give us a glimpse inside the RCMP's theory on the case.
Did you feel in the beginning that they suspected you?
Of course. The stepfather was always a prime suspect right off the beginning.
You felt that from the beginning?
Yeah.
But you don't feel that now?
No, I don't feel that at all. I asked for the lie detector exam, the polygraph exam. I gave them my phone. I told them I, do drug tests because there's a lot of rumors online about a drug party.
Okay, you mentioned you offered to take a polygraph test.
Yeah.
Did the RCMP take you up on that?
Yes, they did.
And how did that unfold?
It took a little while to set up, and we go in, sit down in a big comfy chair, and they have multiple sensory pads. You have them underneath your forearms, you have them underneath your butt, and you have them underneath your feet with your shoes off. You have a sweat gland on one finger. You have a measuring instrument for blood flow that goes in and out of your hand. And you have a cuff on your arm for blood pressure to measure your pulse.
Were you nervous?
Yeah, I was extremely nervous. Especially with the first question they asked you, did you kill Lilly and Jack?
What other kinds of questions did they ask you?
All the questions pertain to the death of Lilly and Jack. Are you accessory to the murder of Lilly and Jack? They were all.
So all of the questions assumed that the children are no longer alive?
Yeah.
There were no questions at all about, did you take them somewhere? Could
No.
they be somewhere?
No.
So that is interesting. I think two main things to talk about. First of all is just his attitude and behavior. To me, he seems open and he doesn't seem like he's overly nervous talking in his largest televised appearance. This isn't, again, it isn't someone holding a camera towards him in his driveway. This is like him on a TV set with a CBC national reporter who's asking follow-up questions, which is different than just the one-shot questions he would have been doing in the past. Did it surprise you to hear how well he did? I think he did great.
It didn't surprise me to hear that he did well and passed. What did surprise me is how fast they got to the point in questioning. Because I think last time we were kind of speculating on what kind of questions they would ask him. And I think I said, they probably start slow, give you a few, fluff questions. But no, they got right to the point.
Yeah, did you kill them? And like he said, like Daniel said, there wasn't questions about a disappearance or them wandering away, or it was questions about a crime and his involvement in a crime. But
murder.
Yeah, I don't know a polygraph and the strategy of all that. Maybe that's a part of the strategy, is to just ramp it up to 11 right from the beginning. But it is surprising. It seems like it surprised him. It certainly surprises me. But let's learn more about other interviews that Daniel is aware of and people that may be suspects. Daniel reveals a whole lot of information about the investigation. Throughout this entire appearance on CBC, it seems like he's almost on the verge of revealing too much. He stops himself so many times being like, I don't think I can answer that. I will also say, though, that Daniel Martell is a terrible secret keeper, because he also often says, I don't think I can say anything about this, but, and then he says it. He's done that. Remember last week, I think, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago or 2 episodes ago.
You mentioned last time we chatted that you'd offered to do a polygraph test.
That is correct.
Has that already happened?
That has happened.
Right. And did you get results from that yet?
I do have results, and I don't know if I can share those results, but they were good in my favor, we'll say that.
He kind of did that through this interview. He kept, saying it after saying he shouldn't say it. But anyway, let's hear about him discuss other interviews that were conducted that he's aware of by our CMP investigators.
The police have done a number of polygraph tests. They've done 53 formal interviews. Do you know who these people are?
Yeah.
That's a lot of interviews.
It is a lot of interviews. A lot of them are my family, people that live in the area. And those interviews, typically, my interview was 4 hours. And a lot of the interviews from my family were 1-2 hours. So there's a lot of time taken up, and they ask detailed questions.
Do you know who else actually took a polygraph test?
I mean, I do, but I'm not going to say anything that's going to impede the investigation.
Okay. Do you know if Malaya has taken one?
I don't know if I can say it, but I will anyway. Yes, she did take one.
Okay, she took one. Do you know the result?
No. RCMP wouldn't let tell me I asked.
Interesting comments on Malaya's. What he was hesitant to answer it. He did answer it. I don't think that's any surprise though to someone. Like if they gave him one, why wouldn't they give her one?
Well, right. Like those are the two first people that would be taking them. And like, I don't know. I feel like Daniel is so not like you just said, terrible liar. Or secret keeper, I should say. There's that. And I don't know. He seems like such a simple man. And if he is hiding some crazy secret right now, he's like a huge sociopath because this man just seems so not guilty. Like,
not a great secret keeper. He also seems like he'd maybe be the type of person that'd be a little easy to trick as well. That's just my vibe on him.
Right.
We're going to hear him not keep a few more secrets. The next part of it I want to break down with you is during the CBC interview, they asked him of several questions about the last sighting of the kids. So remember it came out that, there was all this question about when were the children last seen by someone other than Daniel and Malaya. We then learned they were seen the day before the disappearance. The police didn't say where or who saw them or whatever. They just said, they were seen the day before. CBC asked Daniel a bunch about the last known sighting of the children. And the way, spoiler alert, it ends up being at this mall in not far from where they lived. But the way he describes it, it just makes it seem like there's a whole lot to this sighting. So you'll see what I mean. Just the way he answers the questions and how tentative he is. There's something serious about this last known sighting. It seems to me anyway. But I'll get your take after we listen to it. Here it comes.
The kids were seen the day before. I know a lot of people didn't know that. I still see a lot of stuff online that the kids could have been missing for days. They were out of school for days. And they were seen in the Glasgow area on camera the day before the disappearance in the afternoon.
Where was that?
I don't know if I can say that, but it was near the Highland Square Mall.
Was it with you?
It was with me, Malaya, and Meadow, and Lilly and Jack were there too.
And are the police aware of that?
The police were aware of that since.
Do they have that video?
Yes, they do. I also talked to my coworker in the parking lot as well, and he verified that with investigators as well. So, for all the speculation, they were gone days ahead of time, or they were seen the afternoon on camera before the disappearance.
Did that segment and that line of questioning and answer did it not seem like overly cautious or something? It's if the children were seen at a mall in New Glasgow the day before and it was on video and all this stuff, why the hesitancy in putting that out there? I don't see what relevance it would have to hide that fact or these facts.
I don't know. Yeah.
There's something about that I'm like, that's just all seems so weird.
Well, he stated many times like he doesn't want to impede the investigation. He doesn't know what he can say, and yeah, I just think he doesn't want to screw anything up. And he might have been nervous, and yeah, I didn't think that was weird, but I think other things have gone right over my head. So maybe I'm not a good.
I guess I just feel like I'm not personally. I'm not going to be surprised if when we eventually learn the RCMP's theory that this last sighting plays into something in some way. I just don't see what is important about that. That would be, yeah, I don't know. It's just something doesn't sit right with me about it.
You're getting vibes.
My spider sense is tingling about that. Yeah, but there are other things that Daniel said during the interview that are really interesting. And again, I implore anyone listening who's following this case to watch both Belynda's interview and Daniel's interview in full. One of the statements Daniel made, it was just a kind of a short statement. While he's talking, he's saying there's much more to this investigation than people know.
The RCMP, you know, I mean, they have to keep a tight lip on everything, but there's a lot more that meets the eye with the case.
That was one of the things he said that I'm like, well, what is it? Like, what's going on behind the scenes? It's clear that Daniel knows more about the investigation than the public does. He said himself, and you said it there, is he seems to just not want to step on the toes of the investigators. It seems to me he wants to be transparent and open with the public and put himself out there, but not at the cost of spoiling the investigation, which is a pretty fine line to walk down. But I think it says a bit of something about his character. If when all the cards are on the table and we see what's happened, if Daniel Martell is innocent, I think a ton of people owe him an apology, and a lot of people owe him like a tip of the hat of like putting yourself out there in the line of fire, taking some big shots and doing everything you could for, your stepchildren, which is, there's something to be said for that.
Absolutely. And it kills me to know that even if he is like declared completely innocent, it still won't be enough for some people. True. He is forever guilty to some people, which is super sad.
Let's take our second and final ad break. When we come back, we'll have our last update to this case, and that's going to involve the reward, $150,000, and it's going to almost answer the question that we've had for 7 weeks now: is this a criminal investigation? We'll get to that after this break. Madelayne Klein, for our last update, I want to talk about the $150,000 reward for information related to the disappearance of Jack and Lilly Sullivan. I'm going to play a short global news clip that shares the info, but then I want to give a bit of background on it and explain some kind of weird stuff I found related to this announcement. Here's the clip, and then we'll get into it.
The province of Nova Scotia is offering a reward of up to $150,000 for any information relating to the two siblings who were reported missing last month. In a brief phone call today, the children's maternal grandmother told Global News the family's focus is on finding Lilly and Jack, and they hope this reward will help. Premier Tim Houston says he's also hoping for the safe return of the children. Nova Scotia's Justice Minister says the province is doing everything they can to support the RCMP in the investigation.
We appreciate the work of the investigators, the RCMP, and others who responded in the early days and as the case has unfolded to support the search and now the investigation. We really appreciate the work that they've been doing, and we want to do everything we can to support that.
And Druin says while she can't speak to specifics, rewards like this from the province have generated information for previous cases, and she hopes it does the same for the...
So I want to start with just a bit of background on this reward program. Now, we've all heard of rewards being offered related to unsolved cases or mysteries. Sometimes that money's put up by families. Sometimes it's put up by nonprofits. This is a reward that's being offered by the province of Nova Scotia. I'm going to read you a little statement that explains the province's rewards for major unsolved crimes program. Here's how they describe it. The Department of Justice is offering cash rewards of up to $150,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of persons responsible for specified major unsolved crimes. Unsolved crimes are submitted by the policing agency of jurisdiction to the Department of Justice for consideration and approval into the Rewards for Major Unsolved Crimes program. If you have any information relating to these unsolved crimes, call us toll-free at 888-710-9090. All the calls are recorded, and the amount of the reward will be based on the investigative value of the information you can provide. So all that to say, this is a program offered by the province of Nova Scotia's Department of Justice. It's specifically for unsolved crimes and information leading to convictions for the people responsible for the unsolved crimes. Jack and Lilly's case is added to that program. So what does that tell you?
That a crime took place.
Right. But here's the interesting thing. When I first saw it posted, I was surprised to see it when the press release first came out and was published on their website and on Facebook. It ended with, "We're seeking information related to this crime. Anyone with information related to this crime, contact us at so-and-so." So they were referring to it as a crime. But then this morning, when I went to put our notes together for this discussion, I wanted to get the exact text of how they described it as a crime, and they didn't. So I'm like, what the hell? Like, did I imagine that they referred to it as a crime? I don't drink that much coffee. So I went on their Facebook, the province of Nova Scotia's, and you know how you can see edits to past posts?
Yes.
I viewed the edits. The first version of the post, it's the copy and paste of the press release. They say, anyone with information related to this crime, contact us at such and such a place. 6 minutes later, they edited the post. They edited the text. The first edit they did 6 minutes after originally adding it is they removed a quote from the Justice Minister. The first version of the post, it just had a quote from the Justice Minister saying, thanking the RCMP for all of their work so far and thanking for the searchers for searching. Then an hour after that, they edited the post again, the third version of it. And this third version was exactly the same as the second version, except instead of saying anyone with information related to this crime, contact, blah, 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 they changed it to simply say anyone with information, contact us at.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it was like to go back and this was all the press releases, their website and everything. They edited the text first to remove the Justice Minister's quote, which just seems silly, but secondly, to remove the word crime. And so it's like, what the hell? Is it
someone got in trouble?
I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know what would have happened, but this would have been a high profile release. It would have been looked at. I hope I'm not a crazy conspiracy theorist, but I feel like for weeks now, it's been investigated as a crime. And for some reason, they don't want to say that. And I feel like in reading a bit about this program, the the investigative agency has to apply to have the case listed on it. So the RCMP would have had to contact the Department of Justice in Nova Scotia and say, we want this award for Jack and Lily's case. They get it put on the Major Unsolved Crimes program. And then it's like when the press release comes out, I feel like they're like, whoa, we're not going to call this a crime. Like, we haven't called this a crime yet. Get that down. Like, I feel like there's the worst kept secret in Nova Scotia right now is that the RCMP is investigating this as a crime.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It's they haven't announced it yet, but I mean, everything's adding up to it being a criminal investigation. Like, we have proof in front of our eyes.
Yeah, it's almost silly to speculate whether or not it is. The warrants that we heard discussed I read the email that we received there, that is something that is done in a criminal investigation. The polygraphs, all about, are you responsible? Like, did you kill the kids, Daniel? Like, the questioning related to the polygraph, that would imply criminality. It's added to the Major Unsolved Crimes program by the RCMP, applied to put it there. But for some reason, an hour and a few minutes later, it was edited to remove the word crime from the description of this individual incident. But it was there from the beginning. And anyone on Facebook can see that by going to the Government of Nova Scotia's Facebook page and viewing edits on the post about this. You can see the timestamp for each version. So I don't know what the story is with that. And I don't know what strategy they have to not just tell people, like, we're investigating this as a crime and we're taking public steps to investigate it, like applying for warrants.
Yeah, it's so strange. And I've said this before, but I have no credentials, so I can't even try and think about what their strategy might be. Like, so I'm assuming they have a really good idea of what happened, but yeah, I don't know what keeping that information from the public would help. Like, of course it's now a crime. I don't know. Oh,
Here's
strange.
Yeah. And I want to end, so we're getting to the end of our discussion, but I want to end with one thing that came out this week that really hasn't set well with me. You have to be pretty deep in the weeds of this case to even know about the blanket that was found. But let me tell you a bit about it. So you remember, I think it was our second episode covering this case. We listened to the dispatch logs. We heard the dispatcher communicating with people on the ground who were searching, and the dispatcher was helping organize resources and communicate information among the searchers. During our second episode, I think it was, covering this case, we listened into some kind of key moments from the dispatch logs. One of them that I didn't play, that in hindsight we should have looked back on because I think it's turning into something, is various things were found during the search that turned out to kind of be nothing. But one thing that they found was a piece of a blanket. During the dispatch logs, we hear, it can be heard, the dispatcher sending a police dog in an area where a piece of a blanket was found. But it wasn't elaborated on at all, other than we just found a piece of a blanket, send a dog, and we'll see what the story is with this. I'm now going to read you a little piece of the CBC article covering Daniel's interview that tells me that this blanket is actually a real big deal. Listen to this and see if this blows your mind in any way. I'm just going to jump into the middle of the article. On the first day of the search, emergency responders communicated over an open radio channel reporting that a canine unit was to be dispatched to investigate the discovery of a blanket. According to one official speaking over the radio, family members had led searchers to a location not far from the home where a piece of blanket was found just off the road. The children's mother had believed the blanket belonged to her daughter. Daniel Martell, the children's stepfather, later confirmed that the item was indeed a piece of Lily's blanket. Now they're quoting Daniel. "There is more evidence than the public's aware of, but I can't elaborate on that." He did, however, say that the blanket was discovered near Lansdowne Road, close to where searchers also found a child-sized boot print along the pipeline trail, just over a kilometer from the children's home. While the RCMP would not answer questions about the blanket, they did confirm that the boot print was believed to have been left by a child. When asked if any major developments had occurred in the investigation, RCMP Corporal Guillaume Tremblay stated that there was no evidence to suggest children were abducted.
So how was a possible boot print the nucleus of this and not the damn blanket?
Blanket,
that's
yeah.
massive.
So we've been talking about these follow-up searches in the area of what may or may not be a boot print. Way more interesting than the may or may not be a boot print is the piece of Lily's blanket in the woods on the side of a trail a kilometer from the children's house.
Like that's...
So it makes the boot print more interesting.
Yes.
Only due to its connection to the blanket.
Well, right. And that's just... Up until now, we've been under the impression that not a shred of them has ever been found.
Absolutely. So it explains a better search of that area. It explains the need for more searching of that area. It also explains the interest in that specific trail because it all kind of is connecting now because the home that the police went to and wanted trail cam footage from, that's a home that's kind of on that trail. So the video that these trail cams and security cameras would have had 8 kilometers away or whatever it was, would have captured some of that trail. Much of the searching has been on or near the pipeline trail. So if the only evidence they have is this footprint that may or may not be a footprint, and her blanket, it's a whole different scenario.
Well, and what's the, why would they hide that? I mean, I realize that we're not entitled to know every detail of the investigation, but why would they keep that from the public? What's the deal here?
Well, I would think they'd have strategic reasons to withhold information, but then for it to come out in a CBC article, unless maybe this is an example of Daniel Martell being a horrible secret keeper.
That's very true. This just blows me away.
It also, the police can't control the fact that the dispatch logs were all on a public open radio. So CBC would have done their investigation and listened to those logs just like you and I did weeks ago. but they'd have a better ear than we would, I think. And I bet you that they followed up every single detail here. And they probably tried to follow up on, what was the story with the blanket? Was that nothing? And something in the response they got from someone made them think like, is there something up with this blanket? But I feel like this is big news, and it's not really being blasted all over the place, which is surprising me.
Well, right. Yeah, I don't know. But, well, and it doesn't help the speculation that they wandered into the woods if they found it near a wooded area or the path.
Keep in mind, it's a kilometer away. A kid going to walk for a kilometer with a blanket? And why only a piece of it? That's another thing, too. How big is this piece? I want to know so much about this.
Yeah, we need more information. And I think if anyone is entitled to it, it's you and I.
Yeah, I think at this point. No, what's going to happen is here's my prediction. And we've been updating our predictions every week. I think we're very close to a major development, be it an arrest or a discovery. I feel it big time now. Given everything that's going on, I think we're really close. But I think the search warrant applications, I feel like this is such a high profile case, the media is going to fight for those. And if they get their hands on them, even with heavy redactions where we don't know names and stuff, we're still going to have a pretty good idea of or what the strategy is and what the theory is.
I think so too. Last time we talked, you said I think 2 months or this summer we might have answers, but I think we might be within 2 weeks now.
Mm-hmm. They're going to want to get it right. It's a high profile case.
Oh, yeah.
And it's clear they're doing everything they can. And I think the reward is an example of that. Typically in Nova Scotia, when a case is added to the rewards for major unsolved crimes program, it's done well after the fact. On the 2-year anniversary of a murder or something, it'll be added and they'll have some new news coverage. I have never seen a case in this short of amount of time. It would be quick for it to be within a year.
Oh.
In my mind, it's unheard of for it to be in 7 weeks.
Can you tell me more about this? Because I think we've covered a few cases that have been on the list. Was Devin Marsman's put on the list?
Yeah. So to give an example of the timeline, yes, Devin Marsman's case, who we both covered, was on the Nova Scotia Rewards for Major Unsolved Crimes program. Devin went missing in February of 2022. His case wasn't added to the program until November of 2022. So almost a year later before Devin's case was added. And that was a high profile missing person in Nova Scotia. Lilly and Jack Sullivan, it's 7 weeks and they're on there.
Yeah, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, I think it's showing that the RCMP and the province is trying to do every single thing they can to make this happen.
Yeah, they're serious about finding these kids, and they should be.
Mm-hmm. All this said, we've been through a lot tonight. There are other developments that have played out as recently as this morning that we won't have time to get into tonight. So we already have things developing for next week's episode, which will be part 8 in this series. I never thought it would get this far, and I want to tip my hat to everyone involved in this investigation, in this search. It's just it continues to break my heart and astound me that this is happening.
Oh, it's just as soon as we think that things aren't wheels aren't turning, we get a week like we just got, and the ball's really rolling now. And hopefully by our next episode, we have concrete answers.
I want to thank you for joining us for this episode of Nighttime. Now, before I end here, I want to send positive vibes to everyone affected by this case and share a sincere thank you to everyone searching for Jack and Lily. This is truly a nightmare scenario, and I think everyone out there feels the same way as I. When kids go missing, everything else takes second priority. Now, with that said, I'm going to start wrapping up this episode, but before we part, I have some thanks to give out. First, a big thanks to Madelayne for joining us for this episode. A thanks to Lana for telling us about the vigil. A thanks to Monty Datta, who contributes the music for this show. And Linz from the Dystopian Simulation podcast, who provides my intro and outro voiceovers. And then lastly, but most importantly, a massive thank you to everyone who's listening to Nighttime. Without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. Now, on the topic of support, let me thank the newest subscribers to the premium feed, Lydia, Keith, and Lauren. We appreciate you. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show, you can help us out here in a variety of ways. First of all, a premium feed subscription costs just a couple bucks a month, and that money funds the creation of the show. But the premium feed will also give you episodes of the show ad-free, 2 days early, and give you access to a back catalog of episodes. That sounds like something you're interested in, you can go premium at nighttimepodcast.com/subscribe. And even if you don't want to go premium, you can still support the show by sharing this episode on social media, telling all your like-minded friends why they should listen. Your support is very much appreciated. And before we go, if anyone out there has any story ideas, wants to give feedback on the episode, or would like to submit a question or comment, you can do all that and more at nighttimepodcast.com/contact. I look forward to hearing from you. But until then, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.